Good evening. It is Friday, December 5th, and the Gem State Report is back. Let's, if I can find it, roll the intro. That's right. It is the Gem State Report. I started this last year, right before the legislative session, right about this time in 2024. Ran through the session and then took a hiatus for the break. But we are back. My name is Brian Ullman, editor of the Gem State Chronicle, which for several years now has been bringing you news and analysis that empowers you to make positive change in Idaho. It empowers you to be a more effective citizen of a republic. That is a theme that I keep coming back to over and over and over again. Our founding fathers, when they gave us this system of government, a republic, one in which it's not democracy, it's not mob rule, it's not just the people doing whatever they want. In a democracy, it's pretty chaotic. Things shift very quickly, and perhaps the worst part of a democracy is that the mob can decide for themselves to take from others. We have a constitution that constrains that power. It constrains government. It says that government can only do a certain set of things, and everything else outside of that is reserved to the people. Idaho Constitution says the people are sovereign, and that we lend our sovereign authority to governments. Governments made up of legislators, governments made up of the executive branch, the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state, and the government made up of the judiciary, are the judges who interpret the law and adjudicate disputes and take care of crimes. So our part as citizens is not just to sit back and watch or just impotently complain on social media, as seems to be too common these days. It's to take an active part. That means voting. It also means talking to your legislators, telling them what you want to see, giving them the benefit of your expertise. Our legislators, we have a citizen legislature. Every one of our lawmakers has an outside job. My legislators here in District 14, where I live in Eagle, is Representative Josh Tanner. He's a business owner. Representative Ted Hill. He retired from the Navy as an aviator. He still flies commercial on the side. And Senator Scott Grow, who we will be seeing later today, was a CPA. So they have their areas of expertise, but that means they're not masters of everything, which means we as citizens need to lend them our expertise. Because if you're not talking to your legislator, someone is. Lobbyists, special interests, those people can be very persuasive. So you need to be talking to them as well. Anyway, you can read all about that. I've written about that many times. The purpose of the Gem State Report is to go over the news, what's going on, what maybe is not getting as much coverage in other platforms, also to promote what I'm doing here at the Gem State Chronicle. So let's do a quick rapid fire round. It's been a while since I've done this, so bear with me. I'm going to flip over to a screen share there. GemStateChronicle.com is the place. It is your one-stop shop for news and analysis, as well as information. If you haven't checked out Idaho Insider, you see that right up there. You can check out the executive branch. Legislative branch is probably the most interesting one because it's the biggest, 105 legislators. You can see them just listed. You can see them by district. You can see them by committee. Committee is really helpful because once the session starts, you're going to hear that this bill is in this committee, or this committee is waiting to hear have testimony on this bill. You can come down here. So go to House Agricultural Affairs. That's alphabetically the first one, and wait for it to load there. And you see the members. There's no chair because Representative Kevin Andrus stepped down to take a federal position, and his replacement has not been assigned a committee. And I presume Representative Raymond will take over as chair, but it's up to the speaker. Anyway, and when it's in session, you can actually just watch the live video right there on the page. Tells you what their schedule is, tells you how to reach their secretary if you have any questions about testifying. Gives you links to the page on the legislative website, the agendas and the minutes if you want to see what they said in a previous meeting or see what's coming up. The archive, you can go watch the previous meetings going back years. List of all the legislators on there and what district they're in, what party they're in. The code for this, which I wrote with the help of Google Gemini, sorts them by first is the chair and then the vice chair, and then the members of the committee alphabetically, with the Republicans on top and Democrats down on the bottom. And then over here on the news section is anytime I mention this committee in an article, whether it's me mentioning it or someone else writing it in an op-ed or in a press release or whatever, it will appear right there. So it's very cool. You should check it out. So anyway, I want to do a rapid fire. There were some stories I was following a couple of days ago. Actually, if you come over here to archive, you can just see a list of the stories I've written. And special columnist Savannah DeHay here, who's talking about health. Very interesting stuff. But about a week and a half ago, I wrote about stories I'm following. There were 3 things that were going on, and I just want to follow up on each of those things. So the first one was the Secretary of State was going to head over to Mountain Home to do a recount of the Elmore County ballots. There was an issue where after the results were announced, they found out that about nearly 400 ballots had not been counted. And so that's not good. However, I think this was a good test case for showing that our elections officials do have processes in place in case something like this happens. So the Secretary of State went out there, they did an actual hand count, they verified every physical ballot, and then they hand counted every ballot. And thankfully, it turns out that none of the races changed. Even there was a race where somebody won by 1 vote. I was just talking to the Secretary of State the other day. He said that it changed to being a 6-vote victory. So the outcome did not change, which is probably good, because imagine you go to bed on election night, 100% of precincts counted, every ballot counted. As far as you know, you won. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, you find out, wait a second, there were other ballots and you actually lost. That does not do much for trust in our election systems. In my former home state of Washington back in 2004, Washington, to set the stage here, has not elected a Republican governor since 1980. But 2004 was the closest. The state representative named Dino Rossi was running against the Attorney General, Christine Gregoire. Rossi was ahead with the election night tally. But it was close, so they did a recount. He's still ahead. But they decided to do one more recount, and it looks like they found some ballots that had not been counted. What do you know? And for whatever reason, that one held up. Now, whether they did or not, whether it was legit or not, that's beside the point. The point is, it creates mistrust in the system. Whereas I think what happened here in Elmore County, I think this should actually generate more trust, because a mistake happened. They went out and they corrected it. And it turns out that, there were no races that turned out differently, thankfully. But it also showed that the clerk's office and the Secretary of State's office had procedures in place to take care of it. So, the second story I was talking about was the revenue shortfalls. We're actually going to talk about that a bit later. Every year, JFAC, the Budget Setting Committee, does a revenue projection. How much money are we going to take in taxes? So we know how much we can spend, how much we can appropriate, how much we can earmark for all these different state agencies and projects. The Constitution says you have to have a balanced budget in Idaho. So you cannot spend more than you take in, unlike the federal government. But our revenues are coming in short of projections. But some people think the sky is falling. Senator Groh does not think the sky is falling, and we will hear from him later in this show. Finally, the third story I posted there was about the Kootenai County Republican Town Hall from earlier this year, where a person who has a reputation for being disruptive at meetings such as this was being disruptive at this meeting. And the sheriff, Bob Norris, asked her to leave and then ordered her to leave, and she refused. And so he essentially deputized. He asked some private security who was at the event to help him remove her. And so that's the question that was at hand. Was he acting within the law? Were these private security officials acting within the law? About a month ago, the Attorney General's office said that the sheriff, they were not going to press charges against the sheriff. He appeared to be acting within his prerogative. And just today, I've got this up here, the cases against the security personnel were dismissed. There is one more case against I think the boss, the president of the security company, and that's going to go to trial. So, hopefully there will be a good outcome there. I wrote about this a while ago, before this story, about how this really is the leftist tactic of going in and disrupting our events, our meetings. You saw a few months ago, the Democrats were making hay out of the fact that some of our congressional delegation were not hosting regular town hall meetings. Well, that's why, and that's why they wanted them to, because they wanted an opportunity to disrupt it. So thankfully, it appears that the good outcome happened here. So yeah, that's rapid fire there. I am going to have a message from one of our sponsors here, and then we're going to go into an interview with Representative Jeff Ehlers, who was the co-chair, or is the co-chair, of the DOGE Task Force, where we talk about what that committee is doing and what we can expect in the future. So stay tuned. Lynn Bradescu is a longtime resident of Boise, a Republican district chair, a philanthropist, and a patriot. She's also a realtor by trade. If you're moving to Boise or have any questions about the Boise real estate market, talk to Lynn. She knows Boise. Visit Lynn Bradescu's Keller Williams Realty at lynnbradescu.kw.com. Thank you, Lynn, for supporting the Gem State Chronicle. All right, and let me echo that. Thank you, Lynn, for supporting the Chronicle. All right, give me just a moment here, and I'm going to switch over to an interview I recorded earlier this week with Representative Ehlers. Representative Jeff Ehlers, who co-chaired the DOGE Task Force this summer. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Good to be with you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the DOGE Task Force met numerous times over the summer and into the fall, about once a month. To start, how did you get involved in chairing or co-chairing the task force, and what are your thoughts on how it worked out?
Yeah, good question. So, as you know, during the session, there was a bill ran to create the task force, and that didn't make it all the way. So what happened instead was the leadership of both the House and the Senate formed a task force, which they have the authority to do. They have some pretty broad authority on what they want to look at. And so the leadership of both those bodies formulated it, and the Senate and the House got to have a chair. So the speaker asked me to co-chair this, and then selected committee members to be part of the task force. So that's sort of how it got initiated. And then in terms of how it's been going, so we were tasked with three things initially, which was look at agency consolidation, vacancies in full-time employees, and travel. And so we've been taking a look at those things. Probably a big heavy lift has been agency consolidation, but we have done some things around travel and around FTPs, or vacancies in FTPs, which I think we'll do some more, actually. So more things coming.
So as we get close to the legislative session starting in just over a month, what can we expect to be the fruit of all that work?
Yeah, so we passed, I think it was 6 recommendations in our November meeting for agency consolidation, such as like the Honey Commission, various things, Goat and Sheep Board, others. So we're drafting legislation right now that's come from the DOGE Task Force, has the DOGE stamp on it to take care of those. We also did a lot of code cleanup. We looked at probably, there's going to be 100 or so sections of code that we cleaned up that should come forward in this legislative session. And we actually are going to meet again in December in a couple weeks, because we have some unfinished business that we want to do. There may be some more agency consolidations that we're looking at that we're going to try to get in before the next session. And then we want to revisit travel. So one of the things I've been trying to do is have this last beyond just the life of this task force, right? Putting long-lasting policies in place that are valuable even when we're done. You look at the federal level, right? And it did some good work, and then it kind of flamed out, right? And now they're no longer meeting at the federal level with their DOGE task force. So I want to put some things in place in terms of travel, like standardized policies, and put some things around standardizing vacancies and employees, so we don't have to like go back and revisit this like every few years. So those are some things that I'd like to do also in the future.
So as far as expectations go, how much? I mean, is there a dollar amount that this is going to save in the long run, or is it going to shrink government a certain amount, or right now is it just about going after the low hanging fruit and getting efficiencies wherever possible?
Yeah, right now this first go round has been a lot of efficiencies. So, and I've been saying this for a while. This is going to be a multi-year effort. So we've got some things coming in this legislative session, but I anticipate after the session next year, next summer, doing some more of this work. So we have things on our list, and I've talked to some of the task force members and other of my colleagues in the House and senators. There's still some things we want to get done around DOGE that are a little heavier lift. They take time. Some of these bigger agencies, which is where the real cost savings could be and the real big victories, the big ROI will be, take longer to get through and to sort through and to build consensus around, to build enough support to do those kind of things. And so, yeah, I anticipate this going on into next year, and that will have some of the bigger things. Now, you did ask about like quantifying it, and that is one of my goals, is to quantify it. And we've been working with our Legislative Services Office, shorthand LSO, that's what we call it, to help quantify some of these things. So I hope that by the time the session comes around, we could quantify our recommendations that we've been doing, and then build on that into the next year. So I know there's a lot of anxiousness for us to show ROI, and I absolutely want to show that and show cost savings, but it's going to take some patience for us to get some of those bigger ones that aren't quite so low-hanging fruit.
Do you expect the committee itself, the task force itself, to continue into next year, or is it going to be reformed, or what will that look like?
My assumption right now is we'll continue as is. Maybe there'll be somebody that wants to change off of it, but I anticipate going forward with it. And I think, as far as I know, the task force members will continue with it.
So you and your fellow co-chair, Senator Todd Lakey, recently presented the findings of the task force to JFAC, the Budget Writing Committee. Do you think they were amenable to your suggestions, at least as far as their sphere of influence?
Yeah, they were. They were really receptive to it. Now, there's a couple things on there they'll probably do some homework on. I think state police was one of them I've heard pushback on, that had some vacancies that might not actually materialize into cost savings. But the total that we recommended was somewhere around $30 to $40 million of cost savings by eliminating those positions. So I'm hopeful JFAC will take the action on it. And that is one of the things that we keep in mind, right, is the federal DOGE committee was an executive branch effort. And so they could do things through executive order, but we're a legislative branch task force. And so we have to go through the legislative process. So all of our recommendations, we need to push through this session, this upcoming session, through both the House, the Senate, and the governor, so they can actually become law. So, so I think there's some things that will get through JFAC. They seem receptive to it.
I want to go a little bit into the weeds on this. During at least the first couple of task force meetings, there was a lot of talk about these vacancies, and that's been a big focus. When the legislature appropriates money to a department for a certain number of full-time positions, but that department does not fill the positions for whatever reason, maybe they don't have, they can't find any applicants, or it's just not a priority. Where does the money actually go? Does it get returned back to the general fund and so it's not spent, or does that agency hold on to it?
Yeah, good question. So I don't think I have the exact dollars, but I can tell you some of the routes that it does go. Some of it gets returned back. It's unspent funds, so it gets returned. Others gets, what's the right term? It's kind of like a transfer. I can't remember the technical term, where it goes out of personnel and it goes into like operating, which that's a little bit of a concern for me and for several of my colleagues. One, if it's personnel costs, right, they get the change in employee compensation, the pay raise essentially, and the benefits for that position. And so if each year you get like a 3% pay raise, on a position, but it's vacant, and then you take that money and transfer it into operations, you're essentially getting the 3% raise in operations, which was intended to be for personnel costs. So when we're looking at things, so that's where some of the money goes, is it gets transferred elsewhere, which is concerning. So I was talking about doing things long term. So that's one of the ideas that I'm working on. We'll probably see in the December meeting is what can we do to prohibit that in the future, so that there's none of this kind of funny business of moving money around line items when it really should be for personnel, and things like maybe it just automatically goes away and gets returned after 6 months. So you really need to be serious about hiring. If we have like laws in place for that, then we wouldn't have to come back and examine line item by line item every few years, each agency and what's going on. There would automatically be a process in place to handle these funds and make sure they get returned.
I think the idea of processes in general is underrated in government.
Well, yeah, it's true, because government or any like sort of institution, right, that humans have developed, you put something in place and it gets momentum, and that's the status quo, and so it just carries on for a long time. A body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon, and that's so true with government entities as well.
So one more question. After the very first meeting, you set up a citizens portal where you could go onto the legislative website and submit ideas or submit concerns, whether you're just a citizen or an employee of a government agency. How valuable was that to you and to the rest of the committee?
Yeah, those are really good, and we really appreciate the public input. We've tasked one of the task force members of following up on those, and hopefully in December we'll have more to report there on what's been done. But the public has a lot of good ideas, and some of those have turned into our next list of what to look at. We did low-hanging fruit, and now we'll have some others. The other thing that was really good was some of these agencies, people within departments and agencies brought up some things that we now are going to look at, which I think is fantastic. Like, that's one of the things we wanted is, state employees, people on the ground that know what's going on, come tell us things. So we should have some more input on some of those fairly soon. Not input, but output, I guess, some outcomes from that. So yeah, really appreciate that public input.
Well, I appreciate your time that you've put toward this, and also, of course, your time to share what you've been doing. Anything else you want to share about what to expect or what's been going on?
Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing that you'll probably see in our December meeting is the Medicaid expansion issue. So we looked at that in one of our earlier meetings in the fall, and I think we'll bring that back up again in December. You look at the state budget and you look at how big of a proportion that is, and that's, I think, a really important place for us to look. So stay tuned for I think you'll see some recommendations come forward out of our December meeting around Medicaid expansion.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Representative Jeff Ehlers, co-chair of the DOGE Task Force, thank you for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it, Brian. Thank you.
And there's the microphone. So thank you again to Representative Ehlers for taking time out of his day to tell us about what the committee's been up to. I went to some of the DOGE committee meetings earlier in the summer. I've missed the last couple due to other things. But in the very first one, I actually got up and gave public testimony saying, I know a lot of people are expecting that this is going to come away with abolishing all government, basically just cutting everything. And that's not likely to happen. But we do want to see something. It's like at the federal level. Representative Ehlers mentioned that the federal DOGE committee is an executive branch endeavor. President Trump implemented it and gave Elon Musk and his whole team of whiz kids basically the keys to everything. That's not how this one is. This was a legislative committee. So they don't have the keys to everything. They have to go ask nicely to the governor's office or to the controller's office for this data or that data or this information about who's paying what to where. And so it's not quite the same thing. But you notice a lot of people soured quickly on the federal DOGE stuff, even though they got a lot done. They led to the elimination of USAID. They gutted the Department of Education. Uh, right after Trump's one big beautiful bill, they passed another bill that had like $12 billion in rescissions. That's money coming back that had been previously appropriated, and they're still going. If you go find the DOGE account on X on Twitter, they're talking about what they're still doing, what they're digging up. It's just nothing so dramatic as it was at the beginning, and so that's hopefully what this legislative task force does is, it might not be super dramatic. We're not going to abolish an entire department, but hopefully it's going to save money, make things more efficient, and as we talked about, be something that continues through the next few years. I wanted to flip back over to my screen share here. So this is the Legislative Services Office Budget and Policy Analysis Division Budget Information. Just search for Idaho budget and this will come up. And this tells you how much money, the original appropriation, that's how much the legislature actually appropriated for each fiscal year. Remember, the fiscal year in Idaho for the state government is July through June. So the legislature meets January, February, March, April, and the budget they pass goes into effect in July. And then that's in effect until June. So we are currently in fiscal year 2026. And these are the appropriations, the original appropriations. And you can dig into the money. Trustee and benefits is a huge chunk of it. Personnel costs. You can look at how much they actually spend. They don't actually spend what they've been appropriated each year. Appropriations by category, dedicated funds, federal funds, the general fund. General fund is most of our tax dollars. Dedicated funds are things that are paid for out of special accounts, like certain gas taxes go directly to roads, or when you get a hunting license, it goes to that department to maintain the wildlands. And then federal money comes from the federal government, and that's its own big ball of wax. But yeah, so go check it out sometime. That's it might not make a lot of sense, but these days we have a lot of help. I mean, I'll do my best, and in a few minutes you're going to hear from Senator Grow, the co-chair of JFAC, to tell you about some of these numbers. We also have AI. Just dump it into ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, and ask, hey, what does this mean? That can help you become a better citizen, better at holding our elected officials accountable for the literally billions of dollars of hours that they're spending. Not that it's all mine; it's all of ours. So I'm going to roll another little ad here. It's just a little 30-second thing, and then I will go to my interview with Senator Grow about the budget and about these projected revenue shortfalls. Is the sky falling? Is it the end of the world? Well, we'll find out. I'll be right back. Money Metals is not only a great local business right here in Eagle, it is arguably the premier precious metals dealer and depository in the country. With a vault twice the size of Fort Knox, Money Metals is your source for gold, silver, and any other precious metal that holds value as our dollar continues its decline. Visit moneymetals.com to learn more, place an order, or check out their articles and podcasts on the concept of sound money. Thank you, Money Metals, for supporting the Gem State Chronicle. Indeed, thank you, Money Metals. They have a great operation there. Not only are they, a business that's, in the business of buying and selling gold and silver and other metals, they advocate for sound money policies, and they do support a lot of good conservative, Republican endeavors. They support the Gem State Chronicle, and I am eternally grateful. They've done a lot for various conservative candidates and the Idaho GOP. So thank you again. Let's move over to my interview with Senator Scott Grow. I caught him for a few minutes. It's actually a bit of a longer interview, but he goes into the weeds of these numbers, and I think it's really informative and it's really helpful. So I'm going to play the whole thing. I caught him right in the middle, in between meetings as he was at the Capitol yesterday working. So let me flip over to this. Someday I will. Senator Scott Grow is my representative in the Idaho State Senate. He also chairs the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, co-chairs that is, which is the budget setting committee. And as you might expect, that's a very, very important and busy committee. Now, over the last few months, we've heard reports that revenues are coming in under projections, and that has, a lot of people worried. People fear that we're going to come in have some sort of crisis with the budget. But yeah, I thought I'd bring you on to ask about that and what's going on.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, Brian. And yeah, so first of all, the sky is not falling. It is not a crisis. The economy is doing well. And the projections have been reduced in a conservative kind of way. And so we worked with the governor, obviously, on that. So let me just mention, I have some slides here that we'll be pulling up. In fact, if you'd like to pull up the first slide, let's take a look at that. Okay. So last session, well, first, we project out the revenue 18 months in advance. If you can tell me what's going to be happening 18 months from now, you are my friend as far as revenue. But that's the job that's been given to us in JFAC, and we have to look out and make our best guess. So during the last session, we knew that Trump had the tariff things coming. We knew they were working on a tax bill, hadn't been done. It wasn't done until July 4th. We were out of session by then. But we tried to be very conservative. And so we, on the bottom line, after we looked at our revenues and then subtracted all of the budgets that we funded this year, we left a bottom line of $430 million. That is the largest bottom line ever in the history of Idaho. So you can see that we had that $430 million, plus this first slide shows the different rainy day funds, if you want to call them that. So on that second line down, you see the Budget Stabilization Fund. Back in 2009, we're comparing what it was like in the Great Recession and what it's like now. They only had 206 million back then. We have 880 million sitting in that fund. Public Ed Fund, we have $250 million sitting there. So we have a total of $1,683 million in reserves. That's 29.9% of our revenue, of our budget, I should say. That's considerably higher than it was when they went into the Great Recession back in 2008, 9, 10, 11. So when I first got in JFAC back in 2020, my co-chair and I, Wendy Horman, before we were co-chairs, we sponsored a bill to raise the limit on how much could be put in those stabilization funds. So that's the first point, that we're in good shape cash-wise, no worries there. So if we really were in a recession, we'd be fine, but we're not. Next one, let's go to the next slide. So there we start talking about the beginning. Line 1, you can see on the left-hand side where it says at sine die, April 4th, 2025, we're sitting on 419, nearly $420 million. As of November, there were different expenses that came into play. It said our revenues were reduced. And so you see it's November, it's only 313 million. As you follow down that page, every number on here is important, but let me just hit a couple of them. Let's go to line 7. And the projected revenue for 26, which is the year we're in and doesn't end until June 30 of 26, because we are in a fiscal year. So at sine die, the revenue number that had been projected through the governor's folks was about 5.9 billion. And now they're projecting 5.4 billion. So you follow that on down, and let's look at line 14. That's the governor's 3% holdback that you've heard about. And that gets us at line 16 at sine die. That's the 440 million that we were sitting on, biggest balance ever. And now with the revised revenue, we're in a negative 58 million. That's 58 million on a budget that's basically 6 billion. So that's a big change, but we'll see how the revenues come for the next few months. That'll be part of what we'll consider as we get into the session. So let's look at the next one. I'll tell you, the next slide shows where the major miss has been in revenues that have come in. And you'll see the headings there: individual income tax, corporate sales, et cetera. Everybody's about the same except for corporate income tax. And that has to do, I don't want to get a lot of detail, but yeah, I will just skip that detail. I'll just say that's the part that's missing right now. There's reasons for it, okay? And we feel that those are probably timing reasons. Or for the last 2 or 3 years ago, it was like 250 million that would come in for corporate income. And the last 2 years has been like $1 billion. And there was some tax legislation we did that allowed more money to be front end loaded. So we saw those in December. I'll just say it that very simply. So that with that law change that Trump put in on the SALT deduction, which is your state and local income tax, that's deducted on your Schedule A on your 1040. It was limited back in his first term to $10,000. And then this bill raised it up to $40,000. And that was the concession he did to the legislators from New York and California, those big tax states. So that has reduced the pressure to front end load and pay those taxes before the end of the year. And we'll more likely see those in April, or if it extended to June, possibly. So that's a quickie. So everything's running along about the same except for corporate income tax. One comment on over these last few years, we have tax reduction big time. And so I've been adding like 100 million a year from the state sales tax to reduce property taxes. We've been doing that for 3 years now. And so we're seeing a reduction in the 100% of sales tax that are collected by the state down to about 55% is all the state gets to keep, because we are giving so much out in tax relief to the cities, the counties, and to the property tax folks. So let's go to the next slide. I'll just comment briefly. We've got the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and you've heard a lot about that. If you look down the left-hand side, you see the heading Tax Conformity. Idaho has a very simple method of starting the taxable income for folks with the federal adjusted gross income. And so these are deductions that they have proposed for the federal people. Standard deduction is increasing, bonus deduction for seniors. Let me just mention on the bonus deduction for seniors, that was Trump's attempt to minimize the tax impact from Social Security tax that people receive. But in Idaho, we don't pay state income tax on the Social Security benefits we receive. So that is an addition. That would be a double dipping. You'd not only pay tax for it, but you'd also get a $12,000 deduct. So there's a lot of questions there down that list on the left-hand side. The biggest one is research and experimentation, and that's the corporate kind of thing. So we will, in the tax session, the two tax committees will be talking a lot on what do we agree to put into the state law, how much do we conform with the federal law. And, typically we conform on most things, but there's a whole list there to choose from that we will be talking about. Then you can see there's an effect on Medicaid and on SNAP on the right-hand side and on the hospitals. At the bottom of the hospital thing, we've been working on, there's a $500 million grant that Trump put in at the last minute to help rural states and their hospitals. So the state of Idaho has made an application for that $500 million. So any questions on any of those, Brian, that you want before we go to the actual, how do we figure out the budget stuff?
Do you expect the tax committees to conform to everything in the One Big Beautiful Bill, or do you expect to see some debate about maybe leaving some things out?
I think there's going to be a lot of debate because some of these, one of the biggest questions is on that research and experimentation is on the federal side. They're allowing corporations to go back, they're back to 2022, 23, 24, and recover, get a deduction or write-off back then. Whereas the federal law during those periods did not allow that deduction. It was capitalized and depreciated, if you think about it that way. And so there's questions, should we, possibly go ahead and conform with the 2025, let that happen. But do we give a benefit to go back and give these corporations a deduction when they did all the research and experimentation, knowing that they were not going to have a deduction? So that's just one example of discussion that could go back or forth. So yeah, there'll be all kinds of talk on that, that whole list. There's actually 39 items. You're just seeing some of the major ones right there.
Goodness.
Okay, go to the next slide when you're ready. Okay, so now we'll get you in the weeds of how we create the budgets. And we're just going to focus on the left-hand side in the interest of time. That's the general fund. The other two columns are the dedicated funds and federal money. But we're going to talk about general fund because that's your income taxes directly that come into the state of Idaho and sales tax, et cetera. So we start with the original appropriation for the 2026 year. And then we look at any supplemental requests. Again, we're talking about the fiscal year that hasn't even ended yet. It won't end until June 30, 2026. We already have supplemental requests for 101 million there. And then there's a 31 million executive carry forward. I won't get into that detail, but the governor holdback, you see the 81 million down the line there. That's a deduction. But with all of that, there's a difference of 67 million. Now, what is some of that? That's the basis that we begin with. Now, let me give you the detail of those supplementals at 101,810,000. Go to the next slide. I'll show you the detail behind that. So here's Medicaid is asking for another 87 million over and above what we've already paid or budgeted for Medicaid for the fiscal year 2026 ending in June. And then that is based on two things, basically. More people have moved into Idaho. There's I saw some information today. There's a new person moving into Idaho every 26 minutes. So you look at how fast that's just rolling up our population. So there's a population increase. And then the second is a utilization question. If people that are on Medicaid get into more expensive surgeries, that kind of thing. So those are the projections. We call that a population forecast. That's our best guess from the Department of Health and Welfare at this point. Then we have the Department of Corrections, the same kind of thing. How many new prisoners are involved in the system and what's the utilization? And they have the HIV and the hepatitis and this and that and the other. And so that's the increase that's expected over and above the budget that's already been done for Department of Corrections. So those two add up basically to that 101 million that I showed you on the prior page. Those are the requests to just based on new forecasts. Okay, so we'll go to the next page. Then we get into the 27 budget, and that's the one that we normally would be working on in January, and we will, in addition to any changes that might still happen to 26. So this is where we're projecting out 18 months as to what might happen. And so we start with the base, which is last year's maintenance budget. It was a 5.591 billion. And then we look at some other increases that are being thrown on us. And you'll see health insurance. Health insurance, the increase in health insurance is a 26% increase. Now you think about that. That number you're looking at is just the increase over the amount we're already having to pay for health insurance. And so that kind of goes to the bottom line there. You see 131 million on the bottom line there. So go to the next slide. And you can see this is where we call these enhancements. These are new requests, new things that people want to have. And the governor has asked them to be tight. But you go down to the line about 6 or so there on the left, it says population forecast adjustment. That's that 191 million that we talked about earlier, just on prisons primarily and Medicaid. I'll show you the detail on both of those in just a minute. That's a population increase forecast for the fiscal 27 budget on top of that population forecast we just looked at a minute ago for 26 increases, 191 million there. And then the budget enhancements that they want for the 27 budget are 339 million. And then you see that ongoing rescission, that 47 million reduction. That's that 3% holdback. And you're thinking, oh, I thought that was 81 million. That number has been netted with the Medicaid adjustments that automatically come into play. And so it brings it down to only 47 million in savings. So there's 613 million over and above the 26 original budget that we did. Now, one last bit, and then I'll open to questions because you'll have some, Brian. So let's look a little bit of that detail on that population forecast for the 27 year. And then go to the next page and you'll see it. That's at 191 million. And it's 81,520,000 for Medicaid and 22,300 for Department of Corrections. That's 191 million. That's the forecast adjustment. Again, more people, higher utilization of Medicaid that we're forecasting. We're looking out 18 months here. Department of Corrections, how many more people will be in the system, and the utilization, that's 191 million. And then the next page is one last item, and then we'll take your questions. The last page shows the new requests, new stuff that they want to have over and above the population stuff that we're forced to take care of because we have the prisoners. We have 1 out of 4 people in Idaho is on Medicaid. And so all of that are things that legally we have to take care of. Now, these are new items that they want to have. So Health and Human Services, well, start education, they want 51 million more over and above what we've already done. And Health and Human Services, a little over 8 million. And then the big is economic development. And that's really that's the Idaho Transportation Department within the Commerce Department. For the last, for 3 years, we did 300 million a year for roads. A bunch of that goes to local roads, not just state highways. And then last year, we only did 275 million. They're requesting another 275 million this year. So you add those up, and that's at 339 million on top of the base budget that they're requesting for this year. So, and if you haven't been totally confused yet, let's see if we can confuse you some more. What questions you have, Brian?
Well, I'm not so much confused. It's just it seems so overwhelming to be dealing with this much money, and it just keeps growing. What what makes it so impossible to keep spending from just growing according to inflation and population? Why is it always going above that?
Yeah, let me mention because I think this is an important point that I failed to give you. Right now, if we didn't have any of these additional requests that they're coming up with for population forecasts and new stuff they want, if we didn't have any of that, we would already be at the same budget we had for 26, no increase at all, 0. So you say, what's causing the increases? Well, first, population, more people, more utilization Medicaid. And then we talked about the prisons. We talked about the health insurance premiums. If you have health insurance yourself and pay any premiums, good chance yours are increasing this year. And we have to pay whatever that cost is. That includes the public school teachers and the state employees. That's just the increase at 133 million. But if we didn't have that and we forgot the other stuff that they're asking for, we would be the same budget as last year, 0 increase would be fine. But there's always more requests. And so what happens, the way it works is the governor will do his thing and he has a state address. And he says, we want this, this, and this. And last year when he did that, I can think right off the bat of 200 million that we did not give the governor that he had asked for. And that's the interplay between what the governor wants, which is in behalf of his departments and agencies, and with the legislature, who's more responsive. Well, I won't say more responsive, but we are responsive to the taxpayers. Because as you know, last year we cut 453 million ongoing in tax relief. And we've done over 4 billion in tax relief in the last 3 or 4 years. So that's what we've been trying to do. There's 2 ways you can cut down spending. One is first you cut the revenues. And that's what we've been doing by all of the tax relief that we've been doing. And the other is, okay, now these are the monies we have. How does it get spent? And that's where all the pressure comes there's about 100 departments and agencies of the state government that all think that they need all this money, and they're all really, not all, but many are concerned that the governor has a 3% holdback, which is only held back on all the non-education things. And the education budget is more than 50%. It's about 60% of our budget is education. So if we can't adjust that one, all the statutes that are in place right now for career ladder, we call it in education, and tenure as they work longer and as they get raises and all that kind of stuff. It's mostly employees. It's employees that you're dealing with, and they like to get raises, and they like health insurance.
I see both sides there, in that biblically, a workman's worthy of his wages. You don't want government pay to be just bottom of the barrel, because then you'll just get bottom of the barrel people. But on the other hand, it is tax dollars, and there are certain limits to what government should do, and
Yeah.
it's not an enviable place to be in, where you are having to balance those things.
It's not. Let me give you a perfect example. You talk about, do we pay them adequately, that kind of thing. They have a good retirement benefit. Their plan is very good for that. But here's an example on law enforcement. We pay to train our state police, and then we keep them a year or two when they're finally really trained. And then in many cases, they leave to go to work for the city or the county because they pay more than the state does. So then we're cycling again and having the cost of retraining police. So we're in a competitive market for people, just like every business is.
I guess one more question is,
Sure.
where you kind of, have to deal with policy versus budgeting. The legislature sets policy. It says, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's like Medicaid expansion. The people passed that. Whether that was a smart idea or not, that's beside the point. The people voted for it, and so it becomes the law.
We
And
did.
you have to fund it.
Yeah.
And so how much leeway do you have in JFAC to adjust the budget?
We have some, and that's a great question, Brian, because the other committees there are 9 other in the Senate, and those are the quote policy committees. They decide the policy, like a tax committee, whether the tax is going to be or not. And then whatever those decisions are made there, then they come to JFAC, and those are laws, and we have to conform with the laws. So the ability that we do have, for example, if we have to fund state police, let's say, I'll take that example again. This year, because of the tightness of the budget, we're going to be looking at 3 tiers. Constitutionally, certain things are demanded. Other things are essential, like police services. And then there's other stuff that gets funded. So we have to really hold tight on public ed, for example, which is in the Constitution, and state police is essential. And that's kind of the pecking order. We will probably have to reduce budgets more than 3%, in my opinion, to balance the budget. And that's the way that we'll do it. And did I lose the question in that response?
No, it's it is that balance between how much can JFAC actually do to it's not like you can repeal Medicaid expansion or just not fund schools at all, but there is some wiggle room in deciding how much you give the people. The agencies are demanding this much money or asking for this much money.
Well, for example, on all of these new requests, we have different work groups. There are 10 people in the Senate and 10 in the House that are part of the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee. We divide that. We produce over 100 budgets, Brian, that then the House and the Senate have to consider, and then the governor can veto or whatever, or sign. And so we have work groups where we assign out these 100 budgets to different little groups of our people in JFAC. And they are to come forward with recommendations. I can tell you, we have folks very conservative on the right, and then we've got Democrats on the committee as well. And so for those folks that ever get to some kind of consensus in a little work group, it's the first problem. Then they bring it to JFAC, where we're pretty well evenly split. We didn't used to be. You remember that was part of my challenge is it was tough to hold budgets, because when I first got on the committee back in 2020, it was basically a rubber stamp committee for the governor. That's what I said. Now, as I said this last year, there are a couple $100 million we did not give to the governor that he asked for. And so we are being much more able to reduce monies now because of the makeup of JFAC that's happened last year, and we'll see it again this session. So yeah, we have what we call intent language. It's not policy, but you can say it's budget policy for sure. It's fiscal policy. That if whatever we say, this is the way it's going to be spent, and if you deviate from that, it's a violation of the law. So yeah, we have that kind of ability. But on Medicaid expansion, we can't do anything but fund it because it is a law. We have to deal with it.
You'd have to rely on other committees and the legislature as a whole to change the law to change that.
Exactly, and that would be interesting.
I guess one more question, just a very high level here, and not to get anyone in trouble here, but you mentioned education. It's about 60% of the budget, or at least the general fund.
Yeah.
And the governor didn't even touch that with his holdbacks. And it seems like there's nobody wants to go near any of that. The way that the media spins things, the way the perception among voters is that we must continue funding education. The Democrats keep saying it's underfunded, even though it's the biggest line item on our budget.
Yeah.
And so it seems like there's a very strong headwinds if you want to actually try and cut anything from education or reduce the rate of increase or reform it or anything. Last year, there was a bill in the House about just accountability for where money goes once it's appropriated to the public school system. Do you see any energy to take a crack at education, or is that just going to keep growing?
Well, that is a great question. It's very difficult because the Constitution mandates that we are supposed to provide these public schools, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically what it ends up being are raises for teachers and administrators each year. That's the push that keeps increasing. So like other folks, they aren't content to just sit there and not have any raises or to have a reduction in their salaries. So that's a big push we have. And you've got a teachers union, you've got the administrators, you've got the school boards, you've got all kinds of pressure groups that work on the governor. And he gives us the first recommendation where he thinks how to go. So to substantially deviate much from that is a pretty hard lift based on the composition of the legislature.
Well, we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting session, and I appreciate you taking the time from your work. I know you've been working on this as we speak, throughout the day, and you'll be back at it tomorrow.
You're right, and I appreciate it, Brian, for the opportunity. It's a complex process, and so hopefully this gives just at least a high-level view of what's involved in this process. And I'll just make this comment again. Any subject you pick any one of these 100 budgets. You got people that want to spend more and people that want to spend less. And that's where it all gets worked out in the work group. One of the things that Co-Chair Herman and I have really worked on is transparency, making sure people can see what's down into the detail of these budgets. When I came on back in 2020 or 2019, whatever it was, and I said, well, what's in the base? That something just keeps going from year to year. And they couldn't really tell me. We have something that we just did this year called the Base Budget Builder. We're going back 17 years on every single budget. And you can clear back 17 years and say, what was the bill that added 100,000 here? And the next year they added 200,000. The next year, another 100. All of that buildup, all that transparency is available, not just for every legislator, but the entire public. Okay, so when we talk transparency, that's a new thing we've done that has never been available to the Idaho taxpayer before. You can look at every single bill back for those 17 years to see how those base budgets were built. So transparency is the name of the game, and it's online, and they can find it there under the legislature. And then in JFAC, we have to be able to get out of there and then to the floor, each floor, and then what the governor does is up to him after that. But yeah, there's 105 legislators, and as I always say, we have to get 18 senators, 38 House people, and the governor to vote for things to make it law.
Yeah, it's a messy process, a complicated process, but it's the way things have to be done.
It is, and it's all about working with people to convince them that your ideas are wonderful. Okay, and that is a challenge. When you got to get 38 House people to agree, 18 senators. That's a lot of one-on-one trying to say, hey, this is the best we can do, or what do you think we ought to do? And you try to make it happen. So that's making the sausage, as you and I've talked about before.
Well, I appreciate this look into how the sausage is made, and appreciate your time, Senator Scott Grow, co-chair of JFAC. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again to Senator Grow for taking the time. I know that was a long talk, but this is a very, very, very deep and complex subject, the budgets. It's easy to just stand on the outside and say, yeah, just cut spending. Okay, the question is where? Well, everywhere. That's not really an answer. I wanted to show you, you got it right up here, the budget dashboard that the senator mentioned. It is actually really interesting. You can see how much the base budget has gone up, how many FTPs have gone up. You can see the specific base budgets for each agency going back, 12 years or so, 17 years, I think. All the different maintenance bills. It's a ton of information. And this is exactly what we want from government. We want them to be transparent and to give us this information, but then the responsibility is ours to then take that information and use it. So, we have to go through this and say, okay, well, if we're going to cut spending somewhere, let's go to our legislator with an actual specific thing that can be cut. You can look at how, I've got a spreadsheet where I took actually some of this info off the website, and I've got it in a spreadsheet. I'm working on it. It's been sitting in the background for about 2 weeks. I'm looking at how much the base budget has grown, how much those FTPs have grown in comparison to inflation and in comparison to population growth. The one thing I keep telling folks is that the governor and his government have been able to have their cake and eat it too. They've been able to do both, increase spending and cut taxes. It's because we've had a great economy. It's because we've had a lot of population growth. The governor just yesterday was giving a speech about how the cow problem, the people coming from California, Oregon, and Washington present challenges, but also opportunities, because it's causing our economy to still go into overdrive here compared to a lot of the rest of the country. And so because of that, they've been able to cut taxes each year while still increasing spending. They've been able to do both. They come in and give more money to education, historic and unprecedented investments in public education. They give more money to transportation, more money to this, more money to that, just throwing it everywhere. And at the same time, last year they cut $453 million in ongoing taxes. So it's making everybody happy. Obviously, there's a lot of good conservatives who say, wait, the spending increase, it has to stop. And they're totally right. And this year might be the opportunity to do that, because finally we've reached the point where now those tax revenues are not coming in as high as they want. So as Senator Grow says, they're going to have to cut something. If you want to get some ideas, one other thing I wanted to highlight here, Idaho Freedom Foundation, they are holding a budget press conference, 1:30 p.m. on Monday the 8th, so next Monday coming around the weekend. I would love to be there. I have a pre-scheduled meeting at that exact time, so I won't be there. I will try and catch the recording and see what's going on. Maybe even invite somebody from IFF to come on and talk about this for next week's Gem State Report. But they're going to lay out a conservative budget. I know they have been banging the drum on obviously eliminating the sales tax on groceries, but also repealing property taxes. And I'm sure they're going to come in with a lot of cuts. Just candidly, I don't expect the legislature to take this and say, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to do. But this provides the anchoring point. This says, okay, well, this is what's possible. And this is where we are now, or at least this is where, put it in the frame there, this is where the agencies want to be. And so it'll pull it further. It's like what Donald Trump says about the art of the deal. Whenever you, start a negotiation, you put out an outlandish number, whether really low if you're the buyer or really high if you're the seller, even though you're not going to get that number. But it's a psychological technique where once you have that number there, that becomes the anchor point. So hopefully IFF's number can be down here, and even though the agencies and the governor might be up here, it'll pull them down. It's that anchor pulling it down. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in mind. These budgets are big and complicated, so I'm glad there are people who are doing the hard work of looking through them, both in the Senate and also in the policy, centers and think tanks like Idaho Freedom Foundation. Oh, where's my mouse? It's on the other screen. All right. We've got one more ad read, one more sponsor to thank, and then I will be bringing you a chat with a special guest. Ryan Spoon is a volunteer for the Republican Party, a conservative activist. He's the first vice chair of the Ada County Republican Central Committee, and he is also the recipient of a month's worth of free beer, and he will tell you exactly why once we come back. New St. Andrews College is a different kind of higher education. It harkens back to the traditions of scholarship, excellence, and devotion that colleges and universities once embraced before they discarded those things for today's woke indoctrination. New St. Andrews, right here in Moscow, Idaho, develops leaders who shape our culture by living faithfully under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Learn more at nsa.edu. Thank you, New St. Andrews, for supporting the Gem State Chronicle. By the way, in case you're wondering, those ad reads were all me. None of my sponsors have actually sent me anything to say, "Hey, you read this," like sometimes people do. If they did, I would happily do it and let you know. But no, that was just my impressions of each one. I'm happy to, have partnerships with like-minded people and organizations, and I appreciate New St. Andrews, Money Metals, and Lynn Bradescu for being consistent sponsors of the Gem State Chronicle. So I'm going to go to my chat with Mr. Spoon here. All right, Ryan Spoon is the first vice chair of the Ada County Republican Central Committee, and, well, he's gotten a little notoriety over the past week or two. Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
So, well, why don't you tell the story? What's been going on?
You'd probably have to go back to, I believe it was March of 2024, when Representative Stephanie Mickelson gave testimony before the Idaho House during one of their floor sessions. And she stated that, quote, "every food processor in the state," unquote, hires illegals, was the gist of what she says. So I didn't really think that it was reasonable to assume that she had the ability to speak for every food processor in the state, but it was obvious that she was speaking for the 3 food processing businesses that she owns. And so that simmered with me for a little while. I didn't like a sitting legislator so openly flaunting her violations of immigration law. But I pretty much just sat on it and complained about it to people I knew. And she attacked Senator Brian Lenny in the meantime, went after him, claiming that he knew nothing about agriculture or Idaho or immigration or anything like that, because he was saying that we should uphold our immigration laws. And so then on Inauguration Day of 2025, when Trump was inaugurated, January 20th, 2025, he said, "This is the golden age of America. It's a new dawn." And the next day, Tom Homan, I believe he's with DHS, he put out a statement saying that he was asking for Americans to send info on illegal immigration. And so I did that. I sent in that information that she had posted, or that she had stated before a public session of the Idaho legislature, basically a public confession of her violations of immigration law. And I sent that in. I tried to call the ICE tip line first, and they were way backed up, probably a lot of people responding to Mr. Homan's request. And so I went to their online tip form and sent the information, what she had said. I sent the names and addresses of her businesses, and that was the last I heard of it. I didn't really know what came of that tip. But a few months later, I got a call from Daniel Waters, who was an investigative reporter, and he wanted some information about a story he was writing. And in March of 2025, so March of this year, he published a story with all the filling in the blanks, all the info that I didn't know. And it turns out that just a few days after my tip, ICE did raid Representative Mickelson's businesses, and they had prior contact with one of her employees. So a man named Sajid Soto, he's an illegal immigrant from, I believe it was Mexico, but it may be another Latin American country. Not supposed to be in the US, but more importantly, he had an arrest in 2021 for domestic battery and drug possession. He was choking his wife in front of his young daughter. He was arrested for domestic abuse, and as part of that arrest, they found meth in his wallet. So, wife beater, drug abuser, bad guy, not the noble, hardworking immigrant that the left tries to characterize. But even if he had been, he was in our country illegally. He should not have been here. He should have been deported under the Biden administration. They didn't do their job, but thank God we finally have a president with balls who respects the rule of law and is upholding these immigration laws. So ICE arrested him as at least by January 27th, public records showed that he had been transferred to the Southern Detention Center in Las Vegas and was shipped out of the country shortly after that. And if he comes back in, a rearrest will be a felony this time. So for violations of entering the country illegally, the first time is a misdemeanor, second time is a felony. And I don't know, maybe we can send him to CCOT or Alligator Alcatraz or something like that next time.
I recall that the bill that Representative Mickelson actually, gave that statement on was debating against a bill that would make illegal entry a state-level crime, basically to give police a one more tool in the ability, and this was during the Biden administration, one more way to handle people who come in here without authorization.
Yeah, it seems rather apparent why she didn't want that bill to pass.
Now, that was almost a year ago now. So, we're coming up on January of 2025, or 2026, that is, just a month from now. But this has been back in the news again. What happened this past week?
So a local saloon, the Old State Saloon, who has their own level of notoriety, posted a statement on X, on Twitter, and they may have posted it elsewhere, I don't know, saying that they would give 1 month of free beer, and they've since clarified that to up to 2 beers a day for 30 days, for anybody that could prove that they assisted with the deportation of an illegal alien. And so a friend of mine on X, her name's Lauren Walker, she goes by Roglue18, she tagged me in a reply to that post saying, "Oh, hey, Ryan, go down and get your free beer." And so I replied, "Sweet, I'll be right down to get my free beer." And Mark, who owns Old State Saloon, apparently hadn't heard of the prior incident with Representative Mickelson and myself. And so he asked for some details, and I sent him the news article that documented the whole timeline of the tip and the raid and the deportation. And he said, "Yeah, this qualifies. Congratulations, Ryan. You get a month of free beer." And I think it was later that day, I went down to the Old State Saloon, just a couple miles from my house, and got one of my free beers. And Mark and I had a little chat and toasted to our free beer. And he made a reel or a TikTok video and posted it all over all the social media platforms. And it's really taken off since then. Everything from Newsweek, New York Post, Fox News, Gateway Pundit, Daily Mail in the UK, Hindustan Times, India Times, everybody just, it seems like I'm running out of news outlets that have not republished this story. And I've, of course, gotten the usual flack from the left, everything from just nasty comments to actual death threats on my phone, on email, social media. Documenting some of those, some are more or less credible than others, but it's certainly not the first time that I've fielded leftist hate, so I try to take it all in stride.
Well, I noticed when Old State Saloon first posted about the free beer option, it got picked up by a lot of big national accounts, including the Department of Homeland Security, whose Twitter account has been pretty intense since President Trump came back into office.
Yeah.
I guess it does show the this is such a polarizing issue at this point that people on the right, myself included, are enthusiastic about seeing our laws enforced and people who shouldn't be here deported. But then you have the people on the left who they believe that we're literally Nazis for even considering, deporting people who shouldn't be here.
Yeah, it's ironic. I'm pretty sure the Nazis prevented people from escaping, rounded up into camps, and kept them there, and then eventually killed a bunch of them. Where our goal is to ship people back from this to these countries that they are purportedly so proud of until we ask them to go back to those countries. It seems a little ironic that, I love Somalia, or I love Mexico, or I love whatever country it is, until somebody says, great, how about you go back there? And then, man, that's akin to a death sentence, apparently, to have to go back to these wonderful countries.
Where do you see the debate going here in the near future? We've got the legislative session coming up in January, but also, you're, within your role as a vice chair of the Ada County Republicans, do you see the debate continuing? Do you see things changing?
Yeah, I do see the debate continuing. Unfortunately, there are a lot of financial incentives. So I've had a couple of people in law enforcement have approached me and warned me about the very serious danger that I could be facing. And they've mentioned the cartels that are bringing many of these illegal immigrants into the country. And they said that you're going after their revenue stream, or one of their revenue streams. When people do that, the cartels tend to make examples of them. And so they've advised me on some just very practical, common sense security precautions, and I've taken those very seriously. But it just goes to show that people don't give up money easily. And just like Representative Mickelson didn't want to give up her cheap labor, there's a whole lot of other people, both legislators and the people that donate money to them, that don't want to give up their cheap labor. I hope that it doesn't come to open warfare the way that it did the last time a portion of our country was told that they had to give up their cheap labor. This is akin to modern day slavery. Many of these immigrants, a significant portion of their income is going back to the people that trafficked them into this country. So I hope that it can be settled peacefully and lawfully, but history shows us that when there's this much money involved, people don't back off without a fight. But there's a lot of people that are really sick of this and that are willing to take that fight and to take this to the courts, to the legislatures. And I hope we can continue in that. I hope that voters are going to pay attention and continue to pursue this. But we shall see how it goes. There's events like the shooting in Washington, D.C., the illegal immigrant or illegal alien that ran over the little girl in Boise. There's lots of incidents with illegal aliens running trucks into people and killing people on our highways. That this is often how things change for humanity. We are motivated by tragedy. And these are horrible things to happen, but hopefully the good that will come out of them is that we will learn from our mistakes and that we will change our laws and enforce the laws that are already on the books to fix the problems that are here.
I take it that vacation plans to Mexico are not on the table then? No.
Kidnapping would be the least of my concerns with those types of plans.
It's a reminder that we do sometimes have fun with this, especially on social media, but there are very serious issues and as you said, tragedies that underlie a lot of this as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Ryan Spoon, first vice chair of Ada County Republicans and the recipient of 30 days of free beer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Back on. I'll get better at that timing later. So yeah, thanks again to Ryan Spoon for coming on and explaining the whole backstory there. Obviously, like I said at the end, we do have fun with this. Old State Saloon is having fun with this. He's having fun with this. But there are real consequences here. There are lives at stake. There's the future of our country that's at stake. And this is a real debate. You have people like Representative Mickelson who believe that the proper way forward is to make it easier for companies to hire foreign workers, and that if they are here illegally, well, that's a problem with the law, and we need to fix the law so that they can be legal. Because, with a stroke of a pen, you give them amnesty, and then, well, there's no problem anymore. And she's trying to make it about a racial issue. It's really not a racial issue. It's a rule of law issue. You don't. There was a news story today about ICE picking up more people in the Caldwell area. And of course, the news media, local print news media is framing it as being essentially these Nazi stormtroopers coming in and kidnapping random innocent people off the street. It's a reign of terror. But you never see that kind of coverage when it's about, people who commit other crimes. If somebody's a suspect in murder, assault, arson, robbery, theft, burglary, any of those things, then it's right and proper that law enforcement should go in and take that person into custody. With the case of, and they try to split the difference, saying that these illegal aliens have not committed any crimes. Well, being here illegally is against the law, but they don't believe it should be. The people in these media outlets, Democrat politicians, some Republican politicians, they don't think it should be against the law. And so they think they're doing a good thing by fighting against ICE and President Trump. I actually wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, about a little over a month ago, over in The Hill. Let me bring it up over here. It was my inaugural opinion piece over in thehill.com. It's a national platform. And I was talking about how the local media here in Idaho responded to the raid in Wilder, which is down southwest of here in the southwest corner of the state. There was an illegal gambling operation that apparently a bunch of families were there, and it was a constant thing. And the FBI had been building this case for illegal gambling and people who were involved in that. And when they went in to arrest the perpetrators, the people behind that scheme, they brought along ICE, who apparently took into custody around 100 people who were potentially here illegally. And of course, the media portrays this as, this is awful. This is the Nazis coming in and going after innocent people. It's just, it's awful. And they're trying to portray it that way, even though you look at Idaho's demographics. Idaho voted for President Trump by a wide margin, and President Trump ran on mass deportations. This is exactly what we voted for. And so I wrote there about the disconnect between our local print media and the I think the greater population. Now, our reporters who are portraying the stories this way, they would say they're standing up for other members of the community, specifically the illegal aliens. But that's the question, isn't it? Are those members of our community? If somebody moves into your house and they're not invited, and they eat your food, and maybe they even have a job, maybe they even pay for their own food, but they're living in your house. Are they a member of your household, or are they an invader who needs to go back to their own home? And that's really the question of this debate, and we're going to see it coming in. I saw the Secure Idaho, a group that was looking at election integrity and fighting the ranked choice voting last year. They've just come out with a new website with a bunch of information about immigration legislation and lobbying and donations from big agricultural companies who want to keep things the same, or at least even expand illegal immigration, or make it legal, that is. I'll have more information on that next week. I haven't had a chance to look very closely at it. But yeah, this is definitely a big debate here. There we go. So there we go. That is the Gem State Report for Friday, December 5th, 2025. I'll be back next week. I want to thank my guests again, Representative Ehlers, Senator Groh, and Mr. Spoon. I'll bring you some more guests next week to talk about some of the things that are going on as we get closer to the legislative session. Appreciate you all being here. This should be live streaming on The Gem State Chronicle on Facebook and Twitter, X, should be going out to Rumble, should be going out to YouTube, and Substack. Since this time last year when I started it up before, Substack has added a live streaming option. So this should be live streaming on Substack right now. If you're watching this on Substack, let me know how it works, because I have no idea how it works. I just connected it on the back end and hopefully it's working. So yeah, remember to go to gemstatechronicle.com, check out everything that's there. Check out Idaho Insider if you have any questions about who your legislators are, who your elected officials are. I'm still working on the judicial branch, trying to expand that and get more information for you there. And of course, subscribe. Go up to the button that says subscribe, or go over to newsletter.gemstatechronicle.com is the actual Substack link where you can subscribe for free, where you get 3, 4, 5 articles a week in your inbox. Or you can be a paid subscriber to support my work. And I try to give paid subscribers a little bit of extra behind the scenes information now and then. I will clip these 3 interviews and release them on their own if you just want to watch them or share them with your friends. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate your support. Remember, the whole point of this is to continue learning together so that we can be more effective and engaged citizens of this country. We have a republic if we can keep it, so let's work together to keep it. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. I'll see you next time.